Dirty Birds, what's up? And welcome to another edition of Falcons Final Whistle presented by Zaxby's. I'm your host, Will McFadden. I am joined by Tori, McElhaney, and Terrin Waack. We are celebrating another Falcons victory. They knocked off the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 36-30 in overtime on Thursday night in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They are now 3-2 on the season. They have a 2-0 lead in the NFC South. And honestly, I'm just so freaking happy that this is the last time we'll be recording a podcast at 2 a.m. after a game. It's the last primetime game for a while for the Falcons.
Oh, for a while.
Yeah, no, not for the season, Terrin. As much as right now I wish it would be. But the Falcons have been great in primetime this year. And Jesse Bates said after the game, this was one of the craziest games he has been a part of in his entire career. Tori, where does it rank for you?
Yeah, I think I have been to a lot of college games as a fan and or working them that I would put down as like craziest games I've ever seen, like LSU Georgia back in 2014.
Yep, that's a good one.
Was one that I will remember forever. There's been a couple like Georgia Auburn, Georgia Tennessee. I went to UGA, so there have been a number of those games. But I've been covering this team now for 4 years, and I don't know if there has been a game quite like this. We've seen a lot of, obviously, one-score games. You know, we thought the Monday night 2-minute drill that Kirk Cousins and company put together against the Eagles to win that game was crazy. But this, the way it all unfolded, going to overtime, being on Thursday night, it being at home, it was crazy. It was also crazy because it was a game that was almost completely flipped on its head from what it was 4 days ago, where the offense could not get going. Yeah. It could not get in the end zone, to now we're about to sit here and talk about Kirk Cousins breaking franchise records and the Falcons getting into the end zone 4 times. And I mean, and this idea too of how clutch like special teams and defense was, but the Falcons really had to rely on the offense against the Bucs. And I mean, we're recording this at 2:20 in the morning, and I feel pretty jazzed. And it was a fun environment to be around, and I don't think I've had very many of those opportunities to really feel that in a post-game locker room, talking to Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kirk Cousins, Bijan Robinson, all those guys.
Pretty jazzed. Love it. Love
Pretty
that.
Jazzed.
Pretty jazzed. Okay.
Kirk is rubbing off on me, apparently.
Yeah, all right. Swag surfing, pretty jazzed. 2 sides of the spectrum there. Terrin, what about you? Where did this rank in terms of football games?
When it comes to covering NFL games, it's definitely been the most chaotic one in like a good, energetic way. It was my first overtime when it came to covering NFL.
Nice.
I cannot say it's the most hectic overtime game I have covered, though. Shout out to the 2018 National Championship. But when it comes to professional, this is definitely the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
This it was a crazy game. I mean, I was here for the I believe it was also Sunday night against Philly in 2019 when Julio had kind of the walk-off.
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't a walk-off, but just the late game kind of screenplay. Like, I've been witness to not covering many different Falcons, like crazy late game, the Vic era, early in Matt Ryan's career, games like that. But this one felt really like a heavyweight fight going back and forth. And there were momentum swings. And I just always felt like Tampa Bay was a good team tonight that the Falcons were going to have to find a way to put away, that they weren't just going to fall off. And that's ultimately what ended up happening. Is I think the Falcons really kind of proved something to the fans and to themselves a little bit in this win. So let's do a real quick rundown of some of the key stats. We mentioned Kirk Cousins. He had an all-time night for the Atlanta Falcons. 42 of 58 for a franchise record, 509 passing yards with 4 touchdowns and an interception. Drake London was his top target, 12 catches, 154 yards with 1 touchdown. Darnell Mooney, 9 catches, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyle Pitts, also good to see him, 7 catches, 88 yards. Bijan Robinson, 15 touches, for 77 yards. Flipping over to the defense, David Onyemata gets a sack tonight. That's the only Falcon sack of the game, but good to see him get one. Jesse Bates with a key forced fumble late in the fourth quarter, and Caden Ellis comes up with that fumble recovery. Baker Mayfield, 19-24 for 180 yards with 3 touchdowns.
He was good tonight, too.
He was really good. We'll get to him a little bit later on in the podcast. Mike Evans, 5 catches for 62 yards and 2 touchdowns. For a second there, I kind of thought we might be talking about a game in which Mike Evans took over instead of Kirk Cousins. And at that point, I was looking up some stats. Did you know... So Mike Evans came into this game with more receiving yards against the Falcons than any player in the 21st century.
I know this because you told me about this earlier in the week.
So since 2000, but trivia question for both of y'all. Mike Evans does not have the most receiving yards all time against the Falcons. He's the second most receiving yards all time against the Falcons. Who has the first? And it is a player I guarantee both of y'all have heard of.
Can you give us a hint on the team?
Can we get a hint? It's 2:25 a.m.
Is it the same? Yeah, it is 2:25 a.m.
Fair. Okay. So he played before the 2000s. So 80s, 90s.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, I guarantee you guys know who this. Think of famous wide receivers and just throw a name out.
We're going to have to cut this, but Will, tell us who it is.
We're not cutting it. It was Jerry Rice.
Well, duh.
Over 2,000 career receiving yards against, I think it's 2,300 when he was with the 49ers.
This is why I don't play trivia.
Yeah, a little disappointed in you guys. So anyway, let's move on and keep talking about the Falcons offense. How much did tonight's performance change your perception of this Falcons team?
It doesn't change my perception of them. It reinforces what I already thought of them.
Okay.
I always thought that they had this capability. This was the bar. This was the expectation. This time, not 500 passing yards type of expectation, but this level of a pass game exploding and really, truly being the crux of this team in a way that we have not seen since Matt Ryan was playing here. So for me, as I was watching this unfold, I was like, there it is. It's clicking. This makes sense. This is exactly what I thought it was going to be. Kirk Cousins is hitting Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Darnell Mooney. It was as advertised. Like, this is the first time the Falcons offense felt as advertised from what they were building in the offseason. And because of that, my opinion didn't change. Like, this wasn't necessarily like an opinion changing performance. It really was. I'm like, okay, it took 5 games. Y'all said that, time and time again, even Zach Robinson this past week, I asked him, I was like, how do you, coming off of a game where, yes, you won and you had over 300 total yards of offense, but you didn't punch it in the end zone. Like, how do you weigh that in your head? And he's like, I know that we are this close. He was like, we're a missed block here. We're a missed throw here. In one day, or not one day, but like, there's something that's not connecting. There's something that's not clicking yet. And for the first time in 5 games, the pass game was clicking. Things were working. Guys were open. And one of the most important things that I think Kirk Cousins said after the game was he was talking about the anticipation and the feeling of connection that he has with his receivers. And he said, he was like, in the first 4 games, I felt like I was almost kind of holding it a little too long and not
waiting to see it come open.
Yes, waiting to make sure that they got to the end of their route, making sure that they get the separation where they need to.
And then throw it, as opposed to trust it and throw it.
And he said exactly that in the second quarter. He was like, there was a moment in the second quarter where I think he said he hit a couple of guys. And it was in those moments where he realized, he was like, I was anticipating Drake to be there. I was anticipating Kyle to be there, and they were there. And he was like, that just goes back. I mean, he's been with Justin Jefferson, for how many years that they played together. Like, it's just one of those things. Julio and Matt talked about it all the time. Like, you just knew where they're going to be. We talked about it with Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes 3 weeks ago. That connection between quarterback and pass catcher is so important, and having that innate anticipation. And Kirk Cousins said that he finally felt that tonight. And I think that was the difference.
Yeah, and it was huge on a lot of those, especially over the middle routes that I think Drake London does so well and Kyle Pitts does, really well. And I was thinking a lot back to the pass game on Sunday. When Ray McLeod slips on that in-breaking route and it's Kirk Cousins' interception, that's what we're talking about, I think, with the trust.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to trust that your receiver is going to stay on his feet, but also not allow the safety to undercut him, that he's going to be where it's supposed to be, that the ball's going to be there on time. Like, there's so much trust in those types of throws. But Terrin, what about you? Did today's performance change what you thought about this team? Because it sounds like Tori was a true believer, sight unseen. She knew that this was capable. Did you think that this was capable?
I feel like I blinked and all of a sudden it cracked 500. There was a lot of action going on and whatnot. I still feel like there were moments that I wish there was a bit more.
More from what?
Field goal opportunities. Like maybe they could have just kept going. I don't know. But that's just me being picky. And at the same time, maybe I'm just thinking back to previous games where it felt like so many drives did stall out prematurely. When it comes to whether or not I thought they were capable of this, with all things clicking, yes. Did I think they were going to click? That I don't know, because if you want to think back in these past few games, it's like what has changed, and maybe it is just time and comfortability. So I don't know. It's like an intangible thing that I can't put a finger on. It's just like I'll believe it when I see it kind of person. So I think that's it. Like, I don't think I could have believed it before I saw it, but now that I see it, it's like, if y'all backtrack,
well, I mean,
no.
The thing is like they, up until this point, didn't give anybody a reason to feel differently. Like they didn't give anybody a reason to believe that they could go out and do what they just did.
And so, but you were saying like you're a full believer from the get-go that like they were capable of this.
Yeah.
Where I'm the opposite, where it's like I need to see it to believe it.
No, I totally get that. That sense of like needing to see the thing happen, because now that we have seen what it actually looks like, I think it's so much easier to go into a matchup against a good defense being like, okay, well, I know what it looks like when Kirk and Darnell connect on an improbable play for a touchdown. Like, I know what it looks like when Kyle Pitts gets that sliver of daylight. So yeah, there are some nitpicks about the offense that we can get to here in 1 second, but by and large, like, seeing it and being able to confirm with your eyes, what the ceiling looks like and how different the ceiling for this offense feels compared to those of years past. Tori brought up Matt Ryan era. Like, that's truly the only thing that this can compare to right now, it feels like. So Terrin, KhaDarel Hodge was a player we haven't really mentioned yet, and he had the biggest play of the game-winning touchdown. And you talked to a bunch of players in the locker room afterwards. What were they saying about KhaDarel Hodge and that play?
I mainly talked to Darnell Mooney and Drake London, so his position mates and whatnot. And those two popped off the stat sheet with over 100 receiving yards apiece. But what was so eye-opening is they were quick to applaud KhaDarel. And KhaDarel was also so self-aware in a way where he was like, I know I'm not going to get that many opportunities, so I want to make the most of them when I can, and I'm going to be ready for them when they come up. And he's saying how he stays after practice every day to get a little extra reps. Like, he's putting in all the hard work. And that was something he just kept coming back to, like, man, I've worked so hard. I've worked so hard for this. And hearing Drake and Darnell kind of back that up and be like, we see that. Like, give him that. What's the word I want? Kudos. Affirmation.
There you go.
Yes, my brain is like half operating right now. But that's what stood out to me most. Is kind of like you have like wide receiver 1 and 2 applauding perhaps wide receiver 4? Because you still have Ray up there.
4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, 4 or 5. And KhaDarel's like, I'm living the dream. I have a few opportunities, but I'm on an active roster. I'm getting paid to play football. Like, I am giving it my all so I don't waste an opportunity because I know they're rare. And that's something you have to admire.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, that role, I think, is even more difficult because you have to go in sometimes to the most stressful and intense situations without the benefit of, like, having been on the field to work up a lather. You know how much it stinks when somebody throws to you cold in a podcast when you haven't talked for like 7 minutes, like I'm about to do to Tori, and ask her, what she thought about the penalties in today's game, because that is still, I think, a little bit of a, if there is something boiling underneath the surface here, not even underneath the surface, like starting to kind of creep up, like the penalties I felt could have ultimately, if we're talking about a loss, that's what we would have been talking about. It's the miscues that prevented them from scoring some of the extra touchdowns instead of field goals, things like that. I mean, how big of a factor or concern is this for you still?
I'm very concerned about it. And I mean, Kirk Cousins said it best, I think, in his post-game press conference, where he said, we were able to overcome the penalties tonight. That's
a good way to put it. Yeah.
And it's frustrating. And I'm going to use this stat because I thought Terrin's story that she wrote on the issues that the Falcons have had from a penalty standpoint. So even going into this game, the Falcons had been penalized 13 times as an offense, and 10 of those times, the post-penalty mark-off put the Falcons in situations that required a play of 11 or more yards to get a first down, and 11 of those 13 penalties came on first or second down, which makes sense why the yardage is so long. And there were moments again in this game where you saw things get wiped away, and not just plays here and there, but big momentum shifters, potentially first downs, get wiped away because of a hold here, an illegal man downfield here, a pass interference here. It's offensive.
Yep.
And that's another thing. It's like the
defense had the second fewest penalties called against them of any defense in the league coming into this game.
So, and that's what's so, and that to me, it's like, okay, the offense.
It is offense.
It is the offense.
I think the eye test backs that off.
Right.
It's the offense.
And that is worrisome because it continues to be kind of this, to your point, this underlying issue, this lingering thing that can bite you in the butt if you don't get it under control. To me, these like situational offensive penalties and kind of what they are taking away from this team is really, really tough to overlook in the first 5 games of the season. But also in the exact same breath, it's like they were able to overcome it at least to get the win against the Saints. They didn't score, like drives stalled and ended because of some of these penalties. And then today against the Bucs, it was like, okay, yeah, they did have a few penalties that really kind of put them behind the sticks a little bit, but they were still able to convert some important fourth downs. I mean, they were very, very gutsy tonight. And I'm not saying that like these penalties change everything or the scope or we don't have the ending that we have tonight, but it is something that you have to take note of and you got to clean up.
Today's episode of Falcons Final Whistle is brought to you by Zaxby's. And after a long game, when I'm tired and I need to refuel, I turn to Zaxby's. Their marinated, hand-breaded, fried to perfection chicken fingers, they hit the spot every time. Get yours with seasoned crinkle fries, a nice drink, and whichever of their 12 signature sauces you're feeling at the moment. But it always hits just right. So next time you need to refuel, go get yourself some Zaxby's. I mean, there was a chance where, again, like I thought that they would play a factor in the outcome going differently tonight. Like they, especially in the third quarter, when the Falcons are driving away from us in the press box, like there was a series where Atlanta gets down into the red zone again. They got into the red zone. They've been getting into the red zone a lot this season, I feel like.
And then they're like backed out of it.
And then it's immediately a penalty. And you go back by, I think it was 2nd and 5. Now it's 2nd and 10. And then there was another penalty on the drive. And I was just thinking that our main takeaway from this game was going to be against the best teams in this conference. And if those are your aspirations to compete for the playoffs and get in there and see what you can do, then you need to be able to go toe-to-toe without shooting yourself in the foot.
Okay. It's so funny that you say this because in the third quarter, I wrote down in my notebook, I said, the Falcons can't get out of their own way. The only thing standing in this team's way is itself. In a game that should have been celebrating a pass game finally clicking, the Falcons were left talking about missed tackles, missed field goals, drops, and penalties.
I literally started writing down in this outline. So Falcons missed opportunities in a game against a very good team. AJ Terrell dropped pick. Kuz missed field goals. Kirk sacked out of field goal range on a drive at the end of the second quarter. 2 penalties in the third quarter and a great scoring chance. Darnell Mooney's dropped pass, and then Kuz blocked field goal attempt.
That's so crazy because
And they won this game 36-30.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
With over 500 yards of offense.
Yep.
That's what's so bananas.
It's not mathing.
Like, that's what's so crazy is the narrative of this game would have been so very, very different if they don't win.
Yeah.
If they don't win, we're not talking the only reason I brought that up was to point out that we're not talking about that stuff. But that's the stuff that in week 10, week 11, week 12, whatever, potentially a postseason run, if you have one, knock on wood, that's the stuff that would haunt you.
Yes. And it's Justin Simmons said this exact same thing after the game. I was like, you've been in this league for a long time. You know how important wins like this are, even though there are things you can nitpick and even though they feel tight and could go either way. Yeah, in late November, December, when you're looking at the thick of a division race or the wild card race and you're saying, man, I'm really glad we won those games against the Eagles and against the Saints and Bucks. Not, oh man, it was so close. And that's
all that matters in the end. The W.
Right. But it's also why I think that there is the sense, and maybe why Tori was kind of the disciple of this offense, is that how high can it go? Even on these days when you are kind of making some of these unforced errors, you're still moving the ball really well. Like even in any of these games, their average yards per play has still been really high. So like this could be a better team if they really get the details ironed out than people even think maybe right now. So let's flip over real quick, though, and talk about the defense because they made another really big play late. They made a huge 3-and-out stand to get the ball back for the offense to allow that overtime to even happen.
Like both of you have said, Baker Mayfield played well. And it did come down to a one-possession game again for the 5th time in a row. But seeing this defense step up when it needs to most has been not just a this game thing, but kind of an all season thing already where sure, the Buccaneers were able to move up and down the field, but they were stopped. And that's what ultimately mattered in the end because it's the bend, not break, as we have said multiple times on this podcast too. Like they bent, but they did not break. And I'm okay with that.
And when you're playing that style of defense, you're going to need those impact plays. But when you got a player like Jesse Bates, when you got somebody like Justin Simmons or AJ Terrell or David Onyemata, like those guys, when they step up, it means such big things for this team overall, just as much as it does with Kirk stepping up on the other side. So, Tori, somebody who unfortunately wasn't out there tonight, but who stepped up in a big way in the last game was Troy Andersen. How did you feel his absence in this defense tonight?
So I think it was very obvious that the Falcons missed his speed. And I know that there was at one point, I can't remember exactly what happened, but I believe it was when Baker Mayfield kind of escaped the pocket and picked up like 10 yards in a first down. And Will and I kind of leaned over and we were talking and it was kind of like, okay, there's a lot of leaking and there's a lot of leaking that's happening in kind of this middle part of the field, which would notoriously be where a Troy Andersen and or even a Nate Landman would be roaming. And I felt like you did miss that presence with the two of them. Not saying anything about like JD Bertrand and his performance. I thought he had a really good, once he kind of got into the groove of the game a little bit, I felt like he
had an amazing play down here at the goal line where he kind of like stood up Rashad White.
Right. And so nothing against him at all, but it was one of those things where it's like, you missed the thump of Nate Landman on a couple of those runs, a couple of those plays that like leaked out, or on a couple of those plays that leaked out, you missed Troy Andersen's speed and kind of sideline to sideline ability. So to answer your question, yes, I do think that his absence and Nate Landman's absence did impact the defense's ability to kind of something that we've talked about. And I asked a few guys this over the course of this short week was like, okay, yes, this Falcons defense, they were leading the league in stopping explosive plays of 20 or more yards going into this game. And I remember I asked Gary D. Jarrett, I was like, does that stat matter to you guys? Is that like an identity building stat? And he's like, well, of course you don't want to give up big plays, but like we have got to be better on these like the next rung down. So like 15-yard explosives.
Yeah, like 10 plus.
10 plus, the 10 to like 16. And that was the bread and butter of the Bucs today. They were getting, especially early, honestly, in the first 3 quarters, it was like every 3 plays was a pickup of 15 yards.
Yeah.
And that'll kill you. And that's what allowed them to be what they were. But we knew going into this game, that was kind of their shtick. You knew how accurate Baker Mayfield was. You knew that this was a top 10 passing offense. You knew the problems that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin presented. So you knew all this going in. So I'm kind of like,
yeah. And that's why, I mean, I think we all kind of like looked at each other when Atlanta won the toss and then didn't elect to defer. And they were like, nah, we'll just give us the ball. We'll start on offense.
Yeah.
I think that they maybe had a sense that this was going to be a point scoring game and let's go ahead and get on out and let's be the first ones out of the gates and put some points up on the board. Because that really is just, it felt like the defense was taking a little bit of time to figure out how they were going to operate without Troy in there as well. And that's why I think you saw, especially over the middle, some of those plays early on for Tampa Bay's offense through the air. Because, you know, the way everything was fitting and where everybody was supposed to be, what they were worried about first.
I'll add to, I think it's being overlooked as well that D. Alford got a concussion very, very early in this game.
Yep.
And I think that when you are already down Troy Andersen, and they did play in a lot of nickel looks, but only having Caden Ellis out there at inside linebacker, I think when you don't have D in there, who he's been such an integral part of...
Just that second level inside.
Yeah, I think, nothing against Antonio Hamilton, but D's been the guy. He's been number one. Antonio Hamilton is actually coming off of an injury that he missed the first, 2 games of the season with a groin injury. So that, I think, is also maybe a little bit of a wrinkle in that middle of the field area.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that, you know, the defense continues ultimately, like Terrin said, they're getting off the field. Like they're preventing the touchdowns and they're getting off the field with field goals or, you know, tonight finding turnovers, you know, making big plays. I think the Bucs were 6 of 11 on third down. Again, you'd like that number to be better if you're Atlanta's defense, but they did win the time of possession battle tonight. So things are trending in the right direction. And again, the most important stat is that you have 3 wins in 5 games, even as you're trying to find your footing. And tonight was a game in which the Falcons offensively very much found their footing. And again, I think they're starting to build a little bit of this team identity of, you know, never say die and just kind of being a really resilient team. So let's wrap it up with our game balls. And Tori, I was really going to take your advice and just get rid of game balls altogether for losses, and then they just haven't lost yet. So, you know, I think we're going to just have to keep sticking with game balls because they're obviously going to win forever.
Well,
so,
I mean, they heard me that you don't get a game ball if you lose.
Yeah, they want those game balls. So who are you going to give yours to?
Kirk Cousins, duh.
Shocker.
I feel like you have to. I mean, the man broke Matt Ryan's single game franchise record while Matt Ryan was in attendance.
Yeah, he literally looked at me, I am the captain now, Matt Ryan.
Legitimately, the night that Matt Ryan was inducted into the Falcons Ring of Honor, Kirk Cousins goes and does that. Like, it's crazy. And the fact that Kirk Cousins, at this point in his career, knowing the expectations of the contract that he signed with the Falcons and how much money and
Yep.
that was a very, very important performance for Kirk Cousins, for this franchise, and most importantly for, I think, this offense and the confidence that they need to be building together.
Absolutely. Terrin?
I mean, it has to go to Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
Tori explained all the reason why. I guess my honorable mention would go back to KhaDarel Hodge. Because if he doesn't score, if he doesn't break that first tackle and then slide through the other wave of defense and make it to the end zone without getting caught, who knows what we would be talking about.
Here's my honorable mention, though. Drake London. He was targeted 13 times, had 12 catches for 154 receiving yards, and I thought
Let the
that
underdog have his night.
I loved watching Drake London play. If you talk to Drake London, just like as a person, he's really, really chill and pretty, just like he's very California-esque. But on the field, he flips this switch and he turns into this like really, really aggressive, physical receiver. And I love watching him play. And I felt like we saw exactly that tonight. I mean, heck, the guy had to go into the locker room for a very long time to get cleared from concussion protocol. Came back out, immediately put his helmet on, ran back out on the field. It was a huge part of this offense, 154 of Kirk Cousins, 500 passing yards. I would like to honorable mention him.
All right. Consider him honorably mentioned.
There you go.
Kirk, 3 for 3. Congratulations, man.
You get the game ball.
We like that. Yeah, I had to. I don't like myself either, but I had to.
He did it walking off the field. He did it walking into the locker room. Drake London said that he liked that. Darnell Mooney said, and I quote, "Kirko's a dog," which was probably my favorite quote of the entire night.
Kirko is a dog.
Kirko's a dog.
You know what I like? Do either of y'all have this pulled up? Ben Solak's tweet about the next gen stats or win probability.
I surely do. Yeah, please.
This is a great stat to just kind of wrap, I think, today's podcast up with because, hey man, like who would have thought?
Yeah. So according to next gen stats, against the Eagles, Saints, and Bucks, the Falcons win probability bottomed out at 1%, 26%, and 5% respectively. That's a 0.013 chance to win all 3 games. A 1 in 7,692 chance. It's like that Star Wars quote about the moons. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. No? Yes, that famous Star Wars quote about the moons.
Yeah. No?
Yep.
Okay. Oh. Okay. The possibility of successfully navigating an asteroid field is approximately 3,720 to 1. Han Solo responds to C-3PO, who says that, "Never tell me the odds." So
this was harder. This was less likely than navigating an asteroid field successfully.
Yes, correct. The Falcons beating the Eagles, the Saints, and the Bucks in the way that they did was actually more difficult statistically than flying the Millennium Falcon through a asteroid field.
Well, look at that. Captain Kirk and Bijan Solo just navigating this offense to 3-2 start.
Sign us off.
To infinity and Bijan.
Heck yeah, let's go. All right, so that will do it for today's Falcons Final Whistle. For Tori McElhaney and Terrin Waack, I am Will McFadden. We will be back to preview the Atlanta Falcons' next game against the Carolina Panthers, but everybody enjoy the mini bye week. Celebrate a 3-2 start, and let's get ready for the next one. So until next time, everybody, take care.